So I wanted to follow up on one of the main messages that we've all been hearing all weekend, which is this truth, this fundamental truth of the oneness of everything, that somehow everything is related, everything is, we've heard in the ballroom, everything is you, and the mind can't really understand what that means. But at the level of infinite consciousness, which is the fundamental vibration of life, formless, the source of everything, completely still, empty of form, formless, but full of life, overflowing with life and potential. So from that, here we are in a room, separate people, chairs, situations in life. The whole play of our human experience arises from this formless sense of being, this vibration. So in that sense, and when you're living that, and I imagine everyone in this room has had some experience with that in some way, everything becomes sacred. And you may not be living that way all of the time, no problem with that, but in the moments that you even remember, even that you hear me or someone else saying these words, it's like, oh, everything is sacred. And it just like, there's a melting, right? Like, how do you feel in your body right now when I say, everything is sacred, because it's from this unifying force, unifying isness. It's hard to find the words. This just underlying formless vibration of life. That's everything arises from that. So that means if you look at your neighbor, if you just take a look, at a level, certainly you're seeing different people, right? But at a certain level, there's no difference. And that's where that sacredness comes in. And that's true of everything. The objects in this room, the situations in your life, okay? The fire, okay? No difference. You, the fire, snow, a mountain, no difference. At that level of absolute consciousness. And things that we're not so comfortable with. Well, we're not so comfortable with the fire, but say politicians who are not so favorable toward. Same consciousness, same, and how does that work, that this consciousness creates all these different forms? Well, it's really not the form out there. And let's investigate what creates this sense of other. So if you say, I'm sitting here and somebody else is sitting over there, what is it, and I really want to invite you to go into your experience, what is it that creates that sense of other? Like, what do you have to do in order to come up with the belief that someone over there is different than you? Anybody have a felt sense of that? Conditioning, okay. Like what kind, can you be a little more specific?
Ingrained through family.
Okay. Ingrained through family. So it's almost like we're looking through, I'll repeat the answer. We'll figure it out as we go. Okay. So a conditioned, let's say maybe a conditioned mindset, a conditioned viewpoint, a conditioned way of thinking about things. So that's a thought process, right? So without a thought, there can't possibly be a felt sense of a difference between you and me. But when we add in thinking and we add in feelings and we add in resistance to thinking and feeling, that's how we get this sense of separation in the world. Okay. So, what does it feel like to be separate? And just feel into that question for a second. What does it feel like to be separate? What comes up?
Anxiety.
Anxiety, okay.
Like
A guard, like you're on guard, okay. See if you feel that anxiety, like, ooh, who is fear? Who is that other over there? And how am I going to relate to them? You're on guard, you're vigilant. What else? Anger, okay, like, whoa, what is, an opinion might come up, and then a feeling about your opinion. Fear, okay, somebody in the back? Exposed, beautiful, exposed and vulnerable. You have to have a sense of other to feel fear, to feel on guard, to feel anxiety, and to feel exposed and vulnerable and angry. Yeah. A little bit of curiosity creeps in. Beautiful. Yeah, like, who is that? Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. A desire to connect. Okay. These are in the direction of healing that sense of separation. Yeah, beautiful.
Levels of superiority.
Sorry?
Levels
Levels of superiority. Where am I in the status here? Like, is this person above? Am I below? Or vice versa? And then we get into all these thoughts about ourselves, which is at the foundation of what you were mentioning. Yeah. Shame. Yeah. We can't feel shame if we don't have a sense of other. Isolation and loneliness, right. Wary uncertainty. Can you feel into all these answers? Wow, that's the sense of separation. And you know what? That is what's optional, because it's not the true nature of who we are and and what the universe is. And this is the beauty of, questioning, coming up with these questions, questioning our experience. Because in the sense of other, and I kind of presented the example as another person, but how often do we go to our own experience and we see our own experience as other? Like, oh, I have this, somebody mentioned anxiety in the last session. I don't like this anxiety. That's making the anxiety other. Okay? And how often do we say, I don't like what happened to me in my past. I want that to be different, or I don't want to have to feel what I feel around that. That's making our own experience other. And if you want to feel fearful and isolated and on guard and angry, make your own experience into the other. Does that make sense? Okay. Are there any questions about that? Okay.
Yeah,
Keep going. Okay. All right. So that, yeah. Thank you. So okay, when I talk about your own experience, what I mean is your inner experience, so that if you get quiet and you turn your attention, it's what we do when we meditate, you turn your attention away from the world, and you might close your eyes and you go inside, and then what do you notice? You notice a feeling. That's your inner experience. You notice some noise in your mind. That's your inner experience. So the question then is, what is our relationship with our inner experience? Because it's as sacred as everything else. It's as sacred as a sunset. It's as sacred as your lover when you're feeling completely intimate with them. It's the same with your own experience, because everything arises from this formless sense of unity, including everything that arises within us in our own experience. Okay? So when we are in the identity of self and other, or what I want and what I don't want, any kind of division, we're seeing through projections. So there isn't actually something out there, or even in here. There's there are projections from our own conditioning. So, for example, if I'll use on guard because I have that conditioning too. That if I live in that conditioning, like the world out there is not safe, and I need to know where I am at all times and what's going on with everybody else so that I feel safe, that's a pretty stressful way to be. And that's a living out of a conditioned pattern, okay, and not bringing it in as sacred and as part of myself being the totality. So when we're in this sense of separation, we believe our thought patterns, we either indulge in, we may notice, or we may ignore our emotions completely. And when that happens, we're in this sense of separation, living this normal material life. And I don't know about you, but I find that pretty, for the most part, flat and scary and unsatisfying. But I don't mean to be pessimistic about it, because when you're enlivened in your life and when you're doing what you love and when the conditioning falls away for whatever reason in any moment, isn't that sense of aliveness right there and available to you? Yeah. It has to be, because it's the nature of reality. It's the ultimate nature of reality. So a mind that is in separation is full of noise. It's lots of thoughts running around. It's full of opinions which divide things into right or wrong, or okay or not okay, or I like, I don't like. There's a Zen, it's called the Sin-Sin-Ming. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's a beautiful description of awakening from the, I think, 6th or 7th century Chinese Zen tradition. And one of the first phrases in it is, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. There's a double negative in there. So the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. Okay, so when the mind is not dividing into right and wrong, this and that, in any kind of polarity, there's a certain kind of peace that comes. And I want to say, do you notice that in your own experience? It doesn't matter what my experience is. Like, do you notice that when you don't buy into your opinions, there's a more peaceful mind? Okay. So a mind in separation is often cluttered. It might be numb and flat. It's just filled with content of all different kinds, judgments, needs, all kinds of things. But a clear and open mind is a mind not attached to its content. And I want to say that again, a mind not attached to its content. It doesn't mean a mind with no thoughts. It's the nature of the human mind, especially with our brains. We think. That's what we do. And some thoughts are extremely useful and creative and beautiful. And some aren't, and that's okay. But it's the nature of the mind to think. But consciousness, as its pure vibration, is not attached to the content of mind. It doesn't care about the content of mind. So what that means practically, like in everyday life for humans, is to question. It's an invitation to question our preferences and our judgments and any kind of thought that appears that divides you from life. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Can we? Yeah, thank you. 1 second.
Could you possibly move your hair?
I knew that was going to happen.
Sorry. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk about the mind and you say like the consciousness doesn't care about like thoughts at all, but then when you talk about the bad thoughts, so does that mean the good thoughts aren't important either? Like that's just what I'm getting at. Like, should we not care about either or, like feeling good or feeling bad?
Okay, so I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about this is a bit of a paradox, what the thoughts are saying. But from the nature of consciousness itself, it doesn't need thoughts to exist. and it's sort of pure. It's like pure with the unfolding of life itself, and it doesn't need the addition of thoughts, good or bad. Yeah, but I would test that out. Like, do you need good thoughts to be happy? Do you need positive thoughts to be free of stress? This is an inquiry for everybody. Do you need to think happy thoughts to be happy? What do you, no, okay, yeah.
Are you saying you're just being happy versus talking yourself into being happy?
Happiness is our natural state. So when we're not believing the content of our minds, and I'll get to emotions in a second, but when we're not believing the content of our minds, my experience is there's a natural peace or joy or happiness, or has different faces to it at different times. But there's not, it's the beginning of the end of division when we don't believe the content of our minds. Okay. Yeah.
I have these great periods where I'm relaxed and the thoughts bubble up and they're just thoughts, and life is good, and I don't buy into the thoughts until I do buy into a thought, and I realize I'm out in Arizona and I come back.
Yeah.
And then this happens. About a week ago, on the way from the airport to a hotel, I realized I didn't have my driver's license, which I had been using to get through security and all of those. And as I checked twice, I don't have my driver's license. My blood pressure goes up. My heart is racing. I'm sweating. And I take a breath and I say, what would this moment be like without thoughts? And I look around. I feel safe. This is not a lung cancer diagnosis, okay? It's about a piece of plastic, for gosh sakes. And then I move to the other side. I'm not going to get on a plane until I have a license. And I'm out of state. I'm fucked. And I take a breath and I say, this isn't stage 4 lung cancer. Nobody has died. It's a piece of plastic with a picture on it. I just put that out there.
Well, it's a beautiful example, isn't it, of watching the mind do its thing. And when I say watching the mind, which is a really useful skill, let's say, or tool, you get to see what it's doing. And so you were able to have enough of a gap between your thinking and spaciousness so that you were able to see what your mind was doing and make a conscious choice that felt aligned for you. Yeah, beautiful. This is where, this is a good example of this being very practical. I mean, really, like, how many times do judgments come up in your mind in the middle of the day, right, or in the course of a day? And, I've gotten very used to saying, I'm just not interested in those judgments. And what's really the truth of this moment? Or how do I want to respond to this moment as it is? And bringing an openness and a spaciousness to it. And that's the possibility. We can talk about awakening and, and I to be honest, I don't even really want to go there. But where I do want to go is to talk about how it's possible to be free and open and spacious and way more peaceful in your daily life, because that's possible. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'll also just share that in an example of,
Thanks.
I'll share that in your example of it's not stage 4 cancer, it's also possible to get stage 4 cancer and have it be the best moment of your life. And I think for me, like that's like also so inspirational and aspirational.
It's absolutely possible to meet anything that happens
Yeah.
with that sense of openness. But that's a very good segue into where I wanted to go next, which is, so we talked about the mind, how it can be closed and cluttered and noisy, and then the open mind is unattached to its content, okay? So let's talk then about the heart and emotions. So the heart of separation, the separated heart, what does that feel like? It's contracted, it's maybe cut off, it hurts, we ache, it might show up as physical, it does show up as physical sensation, it may even be physical pain of some kind. So this is the heart of separation. And if we get, so there's no, what I want to, the reason I'm bringing this up in response to your comment is it's beautiful when we can be open to these very challenging things that happen to us in our lives. And we grieve, we feel loss, we feel sad, we, explode in anger. These things are also part of the human experience. And these are also part of our sacred experience that arises from the same one vibration of life. All of it is sacred in that sense. So beautiful to respond in one way and beautiful to respond in another way. And the other way may be, I'm just completely grieving right now. In the story, feeling the feelings, and you know what, that's okay. And in its own time, there'll be something else, because grief comes in waves, and then there might be more openness at a different time. Yes.
What I noticed is I went to bed all in a uproar. I got up the next morning and the license was still gone, but I noticed that I wasn't suffering as much. And you're laying out what the lady in the back mentioned too. There was the shock, numbness, loss, suffering, grieving, like how did this happen, and da-da-da-da. But over the next 2 days, I went through something you're describing, and at some point, what came up for me is this is an experience of loss, of losing something, someone that I'm attached to, possibly taking for granted. And I'm going through this process, and I'm actually recovering and healing. Now, again, this is just a microdose, so to speak. But over the 3 days, it began to feel like I'm returning to equilibrium without that piece of plastic that I thought I had to have on my body all the time.
Yeah.
And it feels like just a small intro to the diagnosis of you have stage 4 cancer.
And it can be anything. So let's take the context out of it and go right to the feelings, because that's what's alive in our experience whenever, if we check in, we often have some kind of feeling going on. And if we're going to treat it like the sacred thing that it is, how do we do that? And what I love is it's really an invitation to be so incredibly intimate with our experience. Intimate with our experience, like so intimate that there's no difference between me and my pain, or me and my sadness or grieving. One second. And another word for that, and a word that I'm really kind of loving these days, is attunement. Like, how attuned can we be? Attune meaning tune, in tune with our own experience, meaning we go in and we feel it. We feel it in our gut. We feel it wherever it is in the body. We feel the physicality of it. We feel the story of it running. We watch it get bigger and get smaller, and what it brings up in us. That's attunement. We make the space, the spaciousness, the openness for whatever is here to be here in our own experience. And it's so incredibly healing. And in fact, in my experience, the only way to truly heal, because it's healing the fundamental problem, which is separation. When we end the separation with our own experience, or when we, I don't even want to say it in that absolute way, when we bring our attention in with so much love to see, like, what is this thing that's here? Instead of shunning it, instead of getting, texting again for the zillionth time, instead of doing whatever compulsive behavior you do, and I do them too, to avoid things. Instead of doing that, we make the radical turn, the radical choice, and we bring our attention in and we say, okay, this too, this can be here however it wants to be here. And then we're honoring it, treating it like the sacred thing that it is. Did you still want to ask your question? Uh-huh.
Thank you. Something that's been coming up, and I love the synchronicity and alignment of the topic, is how do you have intimacy with your life experience without attaching to it? And how do you create space for expression without agreeing? Because I've gotten good at agreeing with what's coming up. I've gotten really good at disidentifying and observing, but then I realize I'm not creating space for that flow. But then when I create space for that flow, it's all consuming, and there isn't the ability to experience it without becoming it, if that makes sense.
And what happens when you experience it and become it? What is that like?
My sense of self dissolves into it, and I am the experience rather than the experiencer.
Okay, so does that mean you're identifying with it? Like, does that make you feel separate then? Like, if you can give a concrete example.
Yeah, examples, good at the abstract. Like, if I'm feeling a grief about something that occurred, I practice observing it without agreeing that, I deserved this, or this is who I am, or this whatever.
Yeah.
But then allowing for me to be here, observing that,
Yeah.
I restrict the emotions that actually evokes.
Okay, so let's stop there. Okay, so I'm talking about something more than just observing, which is like, it's hard to even put into words, but it's such a refined welcoming of that experience. Like, what is this? Like you're looking in your infant's eyes with so much love. It's like that kind of, you're not just observing, you're completely involved with the experience of it. There's not the difference between experiencer and that which is experienced. That's an interim step to observe. And that's a good step, so I'm not in any way saying that's not their thing to do. But there's something deeper and something so much richer, and that can lead you into who knows where. But that's where the treasures go, and you can go, and to get very specific about it, you go in, one way to do this is to go into the body. And so say it's grief that we're dealing with, and I was in the ballroom this morning crying along with everybody else, the grieving that was coming up. And you go into first you were saying no story, okay, so you're not going into the story about it, but what is it like in your emotions, in your body, in the actual physical sensations of it, and making so much space for grief just come however you want to come, tears or sensation or whatever it is, just how it wants to come, and just make that space for it, which is way closer to it, way more intimate with it than observing.
Is it like a curiosity?
That's definitely a component of it. Yeah, a component of it. Yes, and it gives it the space to do what it wants to do. When we're resisting emotions, there's a stuckness. It's like, oh, that thing, and then we're compelled to avoid it or indulge it or, do something with it to try to fix it. That's what we do. When we resist, it's because we don't want it to be there. And all our behaviors of resistance are trying to fix the feeling. And that's like saying God made a mistake right now by giving me this feeling. That's the message. Okay. So this turnaround in this, with so much openness is the full welcoming, the full-on welcoming of the feeling. And can you feel into, even if you don't know it, that's okay, but can you feel into how that could bring about a sense of less separation, let's say, non-separation? Okay, because we're being so intimate with our own experience. So what comes up for you when you feel into the possibility of being attuned or very closely intimate with your experience? Because it's pretty fierce sometimes, because we end up going places where we don't know. First of all, there's a sense of the unknown. You don't really know what's going to happen if you meet something that fully. So what comes up for you if you just, something that is, kind of nags at you or reappears in you, and you think about going into it with that level of attunement and intimacy that we're speaking about here? What comes up?
Terror that I would not come back from the feeling, that it would consume me and become me.
That's
or
right.
I would become it.
Terror that I won't come back from the feeling. Okay. Fear that I can't handle it. I'll get overwhelmed. I'll just be, I'll go crazy. Yeah. And, there's a lot to say about these fears. One is to go slowly, and do it at a pace that works for you. And I know we're a couple minutes left, so I don't have time to go into this in great detail. But fear is a projection of a bad outcome in the future. And what's the absolute truth of it? We don't know. So the fear is I'm going to go crazy, or I'm never going to come back, or I'm going to be overwhelmed by it. You don't actually know that until you do the experiment. So honor the fear that comes up, and certainly welcome that the way that you welcome everything, but also have this fierceness around the truth of things, that you really are interested in ending this sense of separation and finding that sense of unity, and that's way more powerful than your fear ultimately. So I'll leave you today just with this beautiful contemplation and remembrance about the sacred nature of everything, which includes your own experience, which includes all the hard places. And in our welcoming and intimacy with all of it, we find, as we play with this, as we experiment, ultimately the end of separation. And in the end of separation, so separation was fear and hypervigilance and who's on top, that kind of thinking. And when none of that is present, there's this sense of tremendous peace and opening and the infinite knowing of your true nature. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gail.